Good afternoon. The conference program tells me my presentation is in the afternoon. I have no idea how many of you are there. I'm hoping that at least one person is in the auditorium watching this presentation. My research revolves around work and occupations in the area of Elaionas in Athens. In antiquity, Elaionas was the sacred olive grove of the city, and that's what its name means, olive grove. But I'm more interested in the area's long history of changing identities in modern times. In the 19th century, the olive groves begin to give way to other crops, vegetable crops and vines predominantly. Small businesses appear, aiding the rebuilding of the city after the Ottoman rule. So tile makers, kilns, tanneries, bag makers for the farmers, and so on. In the early 1920s, following the Greco-Turkish mutual atrocities and the exchange of populations, Greek immigrants from the Turkish coast arrive and settle in Elaionas, which is an underdeveloped area with no amenities to speak of. And in the late 20th century, Elaionas becomes the industrial zone of Athens. You can see it here in the foreground. By now well within the city, but remaining always excluded from the official city plan. So many informal infrastructures and industries flourish there, especially because of lax regulation and the self-licensing this allows for. Today we find Elaionas in a post-industrial, post-many things kind of leftover stage, with ruins of factories, abandoned construction sites, impromptu houses and shelters, scavengers markets, many cargo transport companies, and also a recently installed refugee camp which accommodates those having fled from Syria and elsewhere. I will talk about a short film I made in 2017 as part of my larger multidisciplinary project in Elaionas. The film is called Work, Memories of Work, and is a diptych piece with two distinct parts. The first part, Work, is filmed entirely inside a tannery, the only remaining tannery in Elaionas. The second part, Memories of Work, consists of outdoor long tracking shots of abandoned factories nearby the tannery. In the tannery, work is not directed towards the city. It is inward looking, related to the body and the senses. The noise of the machines and tools is constant and the smell is unrelenting, and that makes for a visceral work routine. The most common tasks are washing the skin in chemicals in these giant revolving barrels, roll pressing it in machines operated by using one's foot, cutting edges and loose ends, hanging the skin out to dry, and steam pressing it. Here's a short clip from the steam press room. All these tasks are repeated several times with slight variations, and there are workstations assigned to each task. There is a lot of cleaning, of course. I used a tripod and eye-level shots to emphasize the worker's perspective. Shots are static for the most part, with the occasional protracted camera pan to illustrate the slow passage of time. Secondly, for as long as the film stays in the tannery, it's devoid of context. A lot of interesting information and stories are left out. I was preoccupied with the nature of work itself and the human condition of it, the body, according to Hannah Arendt's thoughts on labor. For that reason, I did not want my film to venture outside the tannery, not even notionally, by means of recorded dialogue or voiceover narration. Neither did I want to draw attention to where the workers are from, almost all of them are immigrants as it happens, or to their lives outside the tannery, or to the history of Elaionas and all other things nearby, which are also left out from the film. While I was there filming in the tannery, it became a self-contained universe. I too forgot about the outside world. A brief reminder of things existing outside the tannery, not shown in the film, came as information about trade, which was provided by an old supervisor. He said that some of the leather produced in the tannery is exported to Italy to become Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, etc. So this smelly shed in the back streets of Elaionas is a dot on the map, connected to other dots, fashionable designer outlets elsewhere in the continent. But the real value of the supervisor's remark to me was on the commodity of skin, and this remark unwittingly disentangles it from all else. So the skin is separated from the shed where it's produced, from the workers, the conditions of work, the tools, the chemicals, Dolce & Gabbana. Because all these are peripheral, ephemeral, or even incidental, whereas the commodity is permanent, humankind has always traded leather goods. So in the last sequence, everything else gives way. First the workers disappear, and we see the same spots and workstations now empty and quiet. The silent interval continues into the fridge room, where skin is stored and stacked up in piles. And we begin to hear a dissonant tune together with an aria by Donizetti called Una furtiva lagrima. Then the surroundings fade too as we close in on sheepskin hanging or stacked up in piles, and Donizetti's aria ascends. The dissonant sound ceases, and I intended this as a metaphor for the commodity freeing itself from all the circumstances. In the aria's libretto, the protagonist naively spends his last money on a love elixir, hoping to win a woman's adoration. So the story fitted in with this commodification of love, to which leather goods are accessory. I will now talk about the second part of the film, which is called Memories of Work. Work begins with memory. In other words, one needs to hold on to a thought or a scheme before being able to articulate or execute it. Work passes into memory again when the world becomes indifferent to its offering. So in the second part of the film, there are no more people working away. Instead, abandoned factories parade on the screen separated by blackouts. These traveling shots of factories had to differ in format from the rest of the film to make the audience aware that the subject is not the factory, but something less tangible, the memory of operation. I began to look for different formats, and when I downsized the image on the screen, as you can see, the association with postcards emerged. I found a natural appeal in the idea of a postcard. It's a public medium and yet intensely personal. It connects to the idea of memory, especially the production of memory, and how it petrifies the subject, and notionally it stops its development, at least in the viewer's perception. As far as the two parts of the film are concerned, Postcards seem to relate to skin by engaging with the outermost layers of their subject, its appearance. Thinking of these shots as postcards presented the option of freezing them. In other words, I could use stills instead of moving image, but I like the idea of postcards not staying still, but evolving in time, transcending the very limitation of the medium. So at times, in these shots that you're watching, the camera glides along the street. In other cases, there's a little bit of a camera shake because the shot is handheld or because of the wind on an exposed location. In another universe, I would have it that the filmic postcards would become synchronous with their subject and constantly remolded by it, perpetually renewing the film, recording the wear of the factories and the changing environment. But in this world, this is of course not possible, so I have to be content with a short stretch, a few seconds on film, perhaps followed by a notional expansion once the idea takes root in the viewer's mind. The memory of work is an invented one. Neither the audience nor I, as the filmmaker, had been inside these factories when they were operational. My actual memories are advertisements of these companies on TV and on billboards ranged along the motorway we took every summer to get out of Athens. These advertisements, to a child, made these companies ubiquitous. Petaluda, for example, made the knit and needles of the world. I experimented a little bit with how to present the on-screen moving postcards. I'm currently working on the idea of sending postcards to people who are related to the subject of the film in one way or another. After some experiments, I returned to the simple format of black screen with reduced size, moving image in the middle. Between the postcard shots, there are blackouts, as I mentioned earlier, and these are annotated by machine noise. The aim was to indicate that work ceased only recently in most of these factories, but also to play on a synesthetic moment, the fleeting sensation of machine noise one might experience just by looking at machines. This is akin to the she-shell resonance, the illusion that a conch shell carries the sound of the ocean when in fact we hear the wind whistling into and out of the shell because of its shape. The seashell resonance illusion involves two discontinuities. One temporal, the sound was produced some time ago and the shell supposedly reproduces it, and one spatial, the ocean is no longer there. Similarly, in the film, we see the exteriors of the buildings, but hear what could have gone on inside and at another time, not so long ago. What we hear is not what really went on, not quite. In the seashell example, nature produces a new sound. In the film, it is artifice. The sound was recorded at another location. In both cases, the extraneous element completes the invention of the memory. Does this make the film complicit in the forgetting of work? In the last shot of a factory, smoke comes out of its chimney. The circumstance is real. Computer-generated imagery doesn't really come into this film. So the shot can be read as a triumphant regaining of function. But I prefer to see it as the last stage of delusion in the mind of the filmmaker, when reality is internalized and stored away as false memory. I'm going to end here, and since I can't take any questions in person, here are my contact details. I would be very happy if anyone wants to write to me with questions or to discuss any of the contents of this presentation if you have similar interests. Thank you very much for listening.